Good evening and welcome to Try This at Home. This is Dayna Martin. I want to thank Dave Lizio for creating the intro for my radio show, the new intro. Dave's the guitarist for the amazing metal band Nonpoint. Dave has been a follower and fan of my work for quite some time now, and I've connected with he and his wife who are expecting their first baby any day now. I was their childbirth teacher over Skype. You've got to love technology, but what an honor to be a childbirth teacher to a rock star and his wife with their first baby. That was a great experience connecting. So thanks again, Dave, for the awesome intro for my show, and I really love the support and appreciate you so much. So, well, welcome to Try This at Home. This is Dayna Martin again. I am here and happy to talk to you about unschooling and peaceful parenting and freedom-based living. Last week's show, my son Devin co-hosted with me. It was a great show. We talked about common unschooling misconceptions, and there's so many out there, misbeliefs surrounding this life. And Devin's an awesome co-host. He's so authentic. I've been advocating for unschooling for probably about 8 years now, and for peaceful parenting for about 12 years. So Devin, since he was probably 6 years old, has been doing different TV spots and radio interviews, and he's 15 now. So for a really long time, Devin's been involved in advocacy, and it's just part of his life. I think when you grow up with an activist as a mother, it just becomes something that you get used to. And what happened this week, advocacy-wise, well, I tend to let things unfold organically in my life when it comes to opportunities. But on my way home from bringing Ivy to gymnastics yesterday, I pulled into a convenience store. And there's a sign that's been hanging in the store, a poster, for years now. And every time I go in, it just bothers me. It's a picture of a little boy on the hood of a car screaming. And there's some kind of funny story that goes along with it about tough love. And it's really disrespectful. It's meant to be humorous. And I realize that the owners of the store put it up there to be funny, but for years it's bothered me. And it's just progressively gotten worse every time I go in there. I just find it more and more disrespectful, and my kids now have started to notice it. And when we go in there, they just say, why is that hanging there? The average person wouldn't even think it was a big deal, probably. It's just this joke about teaching your kids tough love by putting them on the hood of the car and driving them around and scaring the shit out of them, basically. But it's really disrespectful. So I had an idea. I pulled into the store, and I had my daughter Ivy with me, who's 9, and I said, can you record this for me? And I approached the owner of the store, and I said, would you mind being on video with something I want to ask you about in the store here? And he said, sure. And I said, okay, great. So she started rolling, and I asked him if he would mind being open enough to hear why I disagreed with this poster and if he'd be willing to take it down. I think when you're advocating, a lot of the advocacy out there for whatever it is, the activism sometimes can be really in your face and handled really negatively and, you know, assuming negative intent. So I tend to approach things differently, which is something I've learned over the years, but it comes really natural to me. I just was really nice to him and just said, I know it wasn't your intention to be offensive. However, can I explain to you why it is? I said, what if there was somebody's wife on the hood of the car and it said these awful things about tough love with a woman? I mean, would that be acceptable? And he understood. And I said, would you be willing to take it down? And he said, you can take it down yourself. So I did. And that video is now on YouTube. Unfortunately, the audio is really kind of crappy. So I'm in the process of having it transcribed, and you'll be able to hear exactly what I'm saying throughout the video. But I want people to see it, to know that you don't have to be afraid to speak up for what you believe in. I think most people are afraid because they think there's going to be confrontation. But when you handle something really peacefully and lovingly and kindly and understanding that, I knew the owner of the store wasn't trying to be disrespectful toward kids. I knew that wasn't his intent. It was just a funny thing. And he even said, I never thought of it that way, and I just thought it was humorous. But when people aren't receptive to you, when you get in their face and you try to control them to advocate for freedom and peace, that's not, it's kind of very hypocritical to approach somebody in a controlling way. So when you're kind and understanding, people are so receptive to understanding where you're coming from. The same is true with parenting. With partnership-based parenting, kids are more receptive to understand and to trust you what you're saying, because you're not being controlling, you're not threatening, you're not being in their face. It's not a power struggle. They're receptive to hearing you because you're a kind, nice parent, and they believe what you're saying to be truth. When you're not the wall between your child and their desires, it's so much easier for them to just not be motivated with fear and to just really connect with you based on whatever you're sharing for information. So that was my personal advocacy for the week, having that poster taken down. And boy, it felt good. And not only that, but my daughter Ivy was with me, and so she witnessed it, advocating for children in general and also for her. It made her feel really good. We got in the car and she said, "I'm really proud of you. That's awesome." So I love to be an advocate for my children. So not only do I like to advocate for unschooling, but I love to empower other people to be advocates themselves for what they believe in and for peaceful parenting. And there's so many different ways to go about it. One way is to write to mainstream parenting magazines, write something based on unschooling or peaceful parenting and submit it. You'd be surprised with how they might be open to hearing it. If you're a writer, that's one great way to advocate. Offer to speak at conferences, any kind of parenting conference. Offer to cater it, base the title and the content on whatever the event is, and offer to speak in your area. That's a great way too. And just being kind to your children in public is one of the best ways to advocate. I had somebody ask me today, what's my radical unschooling elevator speech? Meaning, what do I say to strangers about unschooling? Well, I think because I advocate so much online in my work, that when I'm in public, I'm with my kids. And over the years, they're so bored with me going on and on to somebody, a stranger, about unschooling that I want to respect them first and foremost. So I don't take time from me and my kids to explain this philosophy. But if somebody shows some interest, I always give them resources to research it more. But I have people, it's funny because I have people say to me all the time, and have for years, "Your kids are so well behaved and they want to know your secret." And I say, well, they're not punished and I respect them. And people usually don't know what to say to that. They think that you must be the strictest parent that just thrives on punishment and consistency and all that kind of thing. When I say, oh, they're not punished and they're respected, I treat them, I'm nice to them. People do not know what to say. So yeah, children behave as well as they're treated, period. And that is something that has been proven true in my life. And so if I'm feeling really snarky, like in my head, if somebody says, "Your kids are so well behaved," inside my mind, I sometimes want to say, well, I'm glad that they're pleasing you. I'm glad their behavior pleases you. Kind of insinuating that it's a little bit of a narcissistic approach for you to tell me that you're pleased with the behavior of my children because they're not bothering you. But, I don't do that. But there's times it crosses my mind. But I try to keep it peaceful most of the time. So I argue with that voice in my head going, no, be kind, be loving. But if somebody caught me maybe on the wrong day, I'm not sure. So, yeah, there's a lot of comments I've gotten this week based on the shows. I've had so much great feedback. And, for Dave Lizio from Nonpoint, I have received some great feedback about the intro. People love it. They think it's so much more me. I'm taking calls tonight, and I'm actually getting one in now. So I'm going to take that. Hi, welcome to Try This at Home. This is Dayna.
Hi, Dayna. This is Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for calling in tonight. What can I help you with?
Thanks. Well, I have a 3-year-old. He'll be 3 on Sunday, and a 7-month-old. And everything with the 3-year-old started out okay when my daughter was born. There was, just a mild little bit of jealousy because he wasn't getting my full attention all the time. And then now that she's older and she's mobile and she's playing with toys, it has, it's ramped up. He'll push her over. Within the last week, he started biting her. And then he also will just completely, he doesn't want to share his toys in any capacity. I really don't advocate, that he has to share, that he has to take turns or anything like that. But, if he's got his toys spread all across the floor and my daughter goes for one, even if he hasn't played with it for 3 hours, he freaks out and he grabs it from her and yells at her and tries to hurt her.
Okay. Well, welcome to the world of 2 children.
I know.
I can remember so well going from 1 to 2 and dealing with all these little issues that have come up. But yeah, when you're in the midst of it, they seem pretty intense. So I know I can help you, Michelle. So thanks so much for calling in. So Great. What is your 3-year-old is the son and your 7-month-old is the daughter? Okay.
Correct.
I would say that obviously it's new for him to have somebody else touching his toys, so it's completely understandable. And for a 3-year-old, he's so young and he's still learning that anything physical, whether it's hitting or pushing, it's a form of communication for him. And generally, even younger kids, before they get to that point of being extremely physical, they tend to try to communicate a little more peacefully before it gets to that point. But, I mean, for a 3-year-old, it's kind of unrealistic to expect them to say, oh, can you please not touch my toy? Or to peacefully communicate because it's not part of who they are yet. But I think that we live in a culture that's so fearful of negative behavior, and we're told that we're bad parents if we're not controlling behavior all the time, that we feel a little panicky when we see this. We feel like we have to nip it in the bud or it's going to get worse. But the truth is, when you can focus on the needs under your son's behavior and focus on the needs under your daughter's behavior, it's okay. If you want to mute it while I talk, you can totally do that too.
Okay, sure.
If that's easy enough to do, because the needs of your kids come first. So whatever you need to do, I respect. So if you focus on the needs under your kid's behavior, both the 3-year-old and the 7-month-old, and really focus on that, how can you help them both get what they want? So partnership parenting isn't just about partnership between parent and child. It's partnership and respect for everyone in the family. So both of your kids have needs and they both matter. Your son is not in a position to really want to share his toys right now, and your 7-month-old can probably be pretty easily distracted. Does your 7-month-old?
No, she can't. That's the
really?
problem. She is not easily distracted. No.
Okay. Well, she has a bunch of toys too, obviously.
Yes.
And what about your 3-year-old? Does your 3-year-old son want to connect with you? Could you start playing something with him or getting him involved in something so your 7-month-old can play?
Well, that's usually where the conflict happens. When I'm playing with him and, she's sitting next to me and she's playing with her toys and she sees a stray car sitting there. He will stop everything and run and grab it from her. So, I'm trying to connect with him, trying to make sure that he's getting the attention that he needs from me. And, it's still a struggle because I have to keep with her as well as playing with him.
Okay, well, this is one thing that I would recommend doing then. As you're sitting down with him to play, and he's going to be connecting with you, and so he'll have a few toys around, could you ask him, in a partnership loving way, could you say, are there any toys that you don't want your sister playing with while we play? And if there's something you don't want her touching, can you please go grab it and go put it in the basket over here?
Okay.
Or you could help him. So let him know that and you totally respect that he doesn't want to share these particular toys right now, but kind of pull him into it and just ask if he'd mind, bring it to his awareness that we're about to play this, and if you have any toys out that you don't want her to touch, let's pick them up and move them just so she doesn't touch them while we're connecting. Mm-hmm. Is that a possibility?
Yes. And we've tried that, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, depends on the mood. But yeah, he kind of now understands that if it's on the floor, it's fair game.
Well, could you help him by you picking them up, asking him which toys that you want? Don't just leave it up to him. He's only 3. I mean, ask him if he needs help going through and picking them up. Yeah. So when you say sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, what do you mean? Sometimes he's willing to pick them up and sometimes he's not?
Yeah, sometimes, even with help, sometimes he just won't do it. And, a lot of times that has to do with some other need that he has met. If he's hungry and hasn't told me that he's hungry, or if he's tired and hasn't settled himself enough. So I think it just mostly is kind of a season of the day kind of thing, that when he's in the mood to do it, he will do it. And when he has something else going on, he doesn't want to do it. And also just realize,
a little, when you say he doesn't want to do it, what do you mean?
He won't even tell me what toys that he doesn't want her to get. Yeah. So he just gets, he closes off pretty much. He just won't entertain the idea of even saving his toys from, his sister.
Well, there's a few just thoughts, and one is that this is such a short season in your life, Michelle, that it's going to pass really quick. And I know when you're in the midst of it, it feels like this is life forever, but it's not. It's going to pass really quick. And you hit the nail on the head when you said that if he's tired or hungry, of course he's going to be irritable, and he's going to express it really loudly and grumpily. Part of freedom is not controlling your children's emotions. I mean, part of freedom is allowing them the full range of human emotions that they were born with. And so your son has a full range of emotions that most of us were not allowed to show as kids. We were punished for anything other than contentment or joy. You know, we weren't allowed to show anger or frustration. We were punished for it because it bothered our parents. It was inconvenient. So part of freedom is allowing him to be upset. It's okay. You know, if he's going to get upset over a toy, how can you navigate it and hold it together? I think that we as parents sometimes, or when our kids are really young, we have a tendency to get pulled right into their emotion and get just as angry as they are and get just as emotional as they are. You go to their intensity level of anger and emotion between whatever's happening between them, when in fact that makes things so much worse. If you picture their anger and frustration as a puddle, and then you come and you add to it, man, that puddle gets huge, and you're making such a big deal out of something that would be really simple and resolve itself quickly if you maintained your joy and you maintained your center. No, so you approach that situation light. You don't have to be so heavy about it every time. Like, oh God, here we go again. You know, you just approach it like, oh my goodness, what's happening? Can I get you a toy? And you just sit down and, oh, I know it's so upsetting. Come here. What can we get for you, sweetie? And you just, when you're light and joyful, things resolve themselves really quick. So know how normal it is, that there's nothing out of the range of normal what's happening.
Right. I know it's completely normal. But when he does have one of those moments when, you know, he snatches and he pushes or he yells at her, I don't really know how necessarily to respond to that. I mean, I know how to try and avoid that particular conflict, but when the conflict happens, how can I help him?
How have you handled it? How have you handled it up until this point? What do you do?
Sometimes I'll try to distract her, and you know, sometimes she can't be distracted. Usually, we say, you know, that if there's anything that you don't want her to have, we need to put it up right now. It needs to be put away. And, you know, here's this toy that you were playing with. How about we try and get interested in that again? And again, depending on his mood, sometimes that works. And other times he's very, very focused on this injustice of his toy being touched.
Well, I would say that it's your responsibility to keep your 7-month-old occupied and content, whether you're holding her as much as you can in a sling or having her play in a different area, just to give your son his privacy and the freedom to play with the toys that he wants to play with without constantly being disturbed. I don't know how it is, but that's in your house, but it's really frustrating for him to try to be focused on playing, and then you just having the 7-month-old go over and just get into everything he's doing. It's your responsibility to keep her busy so he can be able to play and not get so frustrated. So that would be my focus, is to keep the 7-month-old happy, content, occupied. So babies that age love to be worn. I mean, I wore my kids in slings until they were, oh my gosh, till I couldn't carry them anymore. Oh, definitely at 7 months. My baby was like...
She's got a personality on her already, and that's a definite one. If you're not moving or she's not asleep, she does not want to be worn.
Well, I would just keep moving. I would keep moving, seriously. Yeah. If you can meet her needs, then babies love to be in slings and love to be carried. They just want to live side by side doing what you're doing. So whether it's vacuuming or cleaning or just walking around the house, there's always something that needs to be cleaned with 2 little kids.
This is true.
You know, grab a broom, grab the vacuum, even doing dishes. It's always so interesting. And when you're engaging her and talking to her, and does she nurse still?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Anytime, just, you know, the breast is a wonderful, wonderful tool if things are getting frustrating for her and him. It's just to nurse her whenever you can. And between the breast and wearing her, her needs will be met. And he'll have the privacy and freedom to be able to explore and play with his toys without constantly being bothered by little sister.
We've tried to have him keep it to one room, and you know, again, he's 3 and that doesn't work. But I think maybe we can try to block off an area for her instead of making it about him. We can try and make sure that there's an area for her, and hopefully then.
And if you're, where is the room that you tried to block off for him?
It is smack in the middle of our house. It's our old dining room, which is now the playroom.
Because he just wants to be with you. He's so little to be playing in a different room than where you are. That's not generally going to work, especially with connected attached kids. Excuse me. They want to be close to you, and 3 is way too young to be separated emotionally. I mean, I'm sure he could for a few minutes, but he'd much rather be in whatever room you're in. So between wearing her, having him nearby, I mean, I know it's in the dining room, but still, they'd want to be in the room that you're in. So unless you're in the dining room too, it could be challenging. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for calling in tonight. I hope that helped.
It did, yes. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Do you have any other questions for me?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for calling.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Have a good night. Bye.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Hello, this is Dayna. Hello? That was weird. Okay. She called right back after. Must have hit redial. The baby must have. So, guys, thank you so much for hanging out and listening to that. I have another caller right now. Let me take this. Let's see. Hello. Hi. Welcome to Try This at Home. This is Dayna. Who's calling?
Hi, Dayna. It's Carrie Mulroney. How are you?
Hi, Carrie. I'm great. Thanks so much for calling in tonight.
Sure thing.
How can
is
I
it
help
okay?
you?
Well, I have a quick question. Is it all right if I offer a suggestion for the mom who just called?
Yeah, go for it.
We had kids sort of a similar distance apart, and we found that a plastic wading pool for the 7-month-old in the middle of the room with something sensory was often helpful, whether it's flour from your kitchen, something gooey they can make a mess with, you can make Jell-O, so that the 7-month-old can sit in the pool and you can sit on the floor and be interacting with both children, but they both have something different to do. So that was something that kind of helped us. And then you're not trying to cause big blockades that make either of the children feel separated from you. Because plastic wading pools have fairly low sides. So.
Nice. I love tips from other mommies. It's totally wonderful. So I love it. I remember I was flooded back with memories of Devin playing with flour and my kids playing with rice, and they're the messy years, but they're the fun years. So that's a great tip. I hope Michelle heard that. I know it can be so frustrating with younger kids and siblings, and it's such a learning curve for the first child. It's definitely challenging. So tell me, Carrie, so how can I help you today? Tell me about your family and what's going on.
Well, we have 4 amazing kids. We have daughters that are 11 and a half and a little over 2, and then sons that are 8 and 5. And I'm struggling with feeling as though I've always believed that children deserve our respect from the moment that they're born. This isn't something like, oh, you have to earn my respect. That was never a philosophy that felt true to me. But with my 3 older kids and understanding, there's a span of 6 years, 6.5 years between them, that's not a feeling that's reciprocated. And I'm frustrated, and I feel myself being cranky with them more than I wish I was. And I feel like I've used whatever tricks and tools that, I've had in my back pocket to try and work through it. I mean, from, yelling and screaming, which is just the worst idea ever, but it's the one that, comes out when everything else has been exhausted, to sitting down with all 3 of them and saying, this is how I feel about this. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry you feel that way. And then it just sort of seems to dissipate once everyone leaves the table. So I think for me, one of the things I'm finding it centers around is I am one of those people that if my environment is very, very cluttered, my head also feels very, very cluttered. And then emotionally I start to feel congested. My kids don't seem to care. If the house is completely cluttered, toys are everywhere, laundry's on the floor, they're right in the middle of it and it doesn't bother them. And I think one of the things that you had said to me when we first spoke was that I've been thinking about for the last week is identifying that what I'm trying to do is ask them to meet a need of mine that isn't a need of theirs.
Right, correct.
So, was actually a really amazing thing to kind of open up my mind to say, okay, how else could I approach this? The problem is I don't know where to begin approaching it. And I don't need it to be, I absolutely positively think that there is nothing worse than a house full of children that is like white glove perfection. I want them to have their things around, and I want them to have their things accessible, and I don't need everything every day put away behind closed doors and the floors mopped, and that's not what I'm looking for. Just to be able to walk through a room without tripping over something or walking through a Lego minefield would be fabulous. And even saying to the kids, hey, can we get this picked up? I'll even help you. And my 5-year-old will be like, well, you can do it, but I don't feel like it. And he'll just walk away. And I know that to a lot of people, they would think, well, that's really rude. But my 5-year-old is extremely literal. He is very frank, and he does not mince words. So he's not trying to be rude. He's just saying, you can go right ahead if that's what, you're motivated to do, but I'm not, so I'm leaving.
Right. I think this is the most challenging aspect or one of the most challenging aspects of peaceful parenting or unschooling, radical unschooling actually, is the whole idea of cleaning. I mean, many of us had chores growing up. We didn't have a choice. We were forced, no matter how gently, to clean the house, a lot of us.
Yeah.
So it's a definitely different situation. I'm sorry about any background noise. Devin's blacksmithing outside, and it's really loud. So if you hear any bang,
okay.
He's forging a new blade. So you have an 11-and-a-half-year-old daughter, a 2-year-old daughter,
Yep.
an 8-year-old son, and a 5-year-old son, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So which are the children do you expect to help you, or are you? I mean, does your 11-and-a-half-year-old daughter ever help?
Yes. She's a little 11 and a half going on stereotypical preteen. And I use the word stereotypical intentionally. She's everything everyone thinks that 11-and-a-half-year-old girl would be, a little bit disoriented, a little bit cluttered. She's also extremely bright. But a lot of it for her is just little things. I'll say to her, do me a favor, can you just make sure that your laundry makes it off your floor and into the closet so that when I go to do the laundry, I know where to grab it from. Except that doesn't happen. And so I'm going into it, fighting that thing between, do I just have a standoff and not wash her clothes, or do I just keep going into her room and picking up the laundry? Or, what's the difficulty? And the closet that the laundry goes in is directly outside of her bedroom door. So all she has to do is put her hand out the door and drop it in the closet so that it's all in a common place and I don't have to go looking around for it.
Well, let's just stop. We'll stay there for 1 second because I just want to address something. For one, your sound is your phone's a little off. I think, can you speak again into it?
Is that, I have a little frog in my throat. Is that any better?
No, it just sounds a little muffled, but it's okay. We'll work with it. I think so much of this is assuming positive intent as opposed to assuming negative intent, which our culture does. I know that negative intent was always assumed from most of us growing up. So assuming positive intent and knowing that your daughter isn't purposefully leaving her clothes on the floor, I think that's a huge thing because we take it as a personal insult that they're doing it in a defiant way. Like, no, I'm not doing what you say. I'm leaving the clothes all over my floor. That's not what's likely happening. What's likely happening is she's just forgetting because that's not her routine. That's not her rhythm. I can't tell you how many times Joe reminds me to empty the lint trap on the washer, and I just never remember. I don't purposely do it. He could take it that way, I suppose, if he wanted to. I'm glad he doesn't. But there's things that I just don't click in my mind to remember, and that's one of them, especially if somebody else is telling you. So assuming that she's just totally innocently forgetting, and you going and lovingly picking up everything, what would you do? Totally assuming positive intent, you just go pick it up and you throw it in the laundry. I mean, until she remembers. When is she ready? When will she be ready to throw it in the laundry basket? When she starts doing it. It doesn't have to be a majorly complicated thing. I go through when I pick up clothes off Devin's floor regularly. Tiff always remembers. Her room is spotless, my 12-year-old. She's a really different type of child, but I don't mind going in and picking up Devin's laundry. And I know he's not intentionally just being lazy or just a slob. I know that when he's like my husband, he gets undressed, his clothes just kind of fall where they may, and then he wakes up wakes up in the morning and he's like, oh, I want to go do this. And he runs outside and he jumps on the trampoline and starts blacksmithing, and he's just not even thinking of it. So I think it's really important to understand that your child's need in whatever moment, your 11-and-a-half-year-old, whatever her needs are when she wakes up, her needs and desires in life and drive is always going to come before your need for obedience, always. And it's unnatural to it. And if a child's been broken down and forced to obey and to be subservient for a long time out of fear, they will put your need for obedience. Well, it's really narcissistic because they don't want to be punished. So it's in a weird way their need too. But if you're not living like that, of course her need to jump up and do whatever she was going to do is going to override, oh yeah, mom wanted me to do this. It's just not even in her awareness. So I think that is a really, really big piece of it, is when you see it, it tends to trigger us. And we're brought back to our own childhood, what would have happened, and then we feel disrespected. But it's not about us. It's nothing personal. You know what I mean, Carrie?
Sure. Where do you find the balance then between, because it sort of funnels into this other thing where, you know, I'll go through phases where I don't mind it a bit. I'll go in and I'll clean her room and I'll think, you know what? She's working so hard on so many other things that it's not a big deal. And then all of a sudden I look around and I realize that if I don't pick up the clothes, if I don't clean the kitchen, if I don't vacuum the floors, if I don't dust the bookshelves once a year, if I don't do this enormous list of things, no one else does them. And I think that's where I start to feel overwhelmed, is that when I'm saying to my family, this is more than I am feeling capable of taking on, can somebody else take some of this? And then nobody does. And so I think maybe that's why it starts to feel like a personal affront when I'm like, hey, I'm saying to you guys, holy cow, this is more than I can manage. Can you be responsible for your part of this? I'm not asking you to do my laundry. I would just like it if you could pick up yours. And then I think maybe that's part of the reason I take it so personally, is I'm not a person who generally asks for help easily. And so maybe that's why I take it more personally when I ask for them to do things and they don't. Because really, my husband and I both work full-time. That wouldn't be my first choice, but it is the situation that we have right now. And so it's more than I feel that I can personally do to maintain our entire household and job. And maybe that's what's lending itself to it feeling a little more of a, like I said, more of a personal affront than it might otherwise if I didn't have another responsibility that took 40 to 50 hours a week. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of different layers there. And what about your husband? Does he help with the housework?
He does. He helps in a different fashion. He's I kind of call him, and I've told him this. It's not anything I hide from him, but I call him the Saturday morning yeller, because he'll get up Saturday morning and all of a sudden he gets in a mood and everything needs to be cleaned and he's yelling at everybody. We've been telling you all week to pick up those Legos and pick them up. I'm going to throw them away. And then the kids are all upset. We're going to throw away the Legos. And then everybody shuts down. So that's not effective either. But that's his thing that he needs to find a happier ground with. He, occasionally we'll go through the same thing where he'll go through like a whirling dervish and clean the kitchen every once and again. But I think to me it's more the day-to-day maintenance. It's if we could each do a little bit every day, it would never get to this point where it feels like the house is trying to swallow us alive.
And I think you'll notice too that the cleanliness and order of the house ebbs and flows. Like everything's in motion. Yes. Like there's sometimes you're really on top of it for a week and everything seems perfect, but nothing is ever permanent. And then there's weeks where it's really hard to keep up with things and you just can't get ahead. The laundry just keeps coming. And then there's weeks where you're right on top of it and you're folding a load as it comes out. So I think really the realistic perspective to have is that it's always changing. And sometimes you're on top of it and sometimes you're not. And the more you force or shame children, especially at the ages they're at, they're still pretty young. They're not even teenagers yet. I mean, they're pretty young to have the kind of responsibilities, which I find is most controversial in my own work, is I have a lot of people that really understand unschooling, but they cannot get on board with the whole not forcing kids to help thing. So if you're asking kids to do something really regularly, chore-wise, if you're living a more freedom-based, peaceful parenting paradigm, it's really unrealistic that they will remember every day. So for me, it might be something like last night, I was doing something and I was taking a coaching call and there was a pile of laundry in the living room and I said to Devin, would you mind folding some of that as much as you can get? I'd really appreciate it. And he said, sure. And he folded all the towels. In the moment, reaching out for help seems to be the most productive way. My kids are always willing to help, but they also have the freedom to say no. If I say, would you mind helping me? They have the freedom to say, I'm kind of in the middle of this game, or so I can't right now. And just like my husband has the freedom to say no if I ask him for help. So it's really this kind of, if I had regular chores with a chart and all that, I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of power struggles and issues that there would be, and it just feels really unfair. So, I mean, I think it's a different factor. Are your kids, do they have daycare, or how, when you guys are both gone all day? Is there somebody?
Right now, the 3 oldest are in school. We're not sure what that's going to look like next year. They're in a small private school that, it's really kind of funny because when we first started there, I liked the fact that the classrooms are very flexible, and every classroom has different areas that if your child is just feeling overwhelmed sitting in their seat, they are free at any time to get up and go to a different space, whether it's laying in a beanbag. They used to have a table with a blanket over it. They could go sit under the table in a cave if they wanted to. But I'm finding as they get older, there's a lot more regimented ditto paperwork that I would like to move away from, but that's where we are for now. And then our youngest goes to an in-home daycare right up the road for 4 hours a day, just 2 days a week, because that was as much as I could get my heart around. And if the lady wasn't as sweet as she was, I would probably still be in pieces. But so my big kids are gone most of the day, and I kind of feel like, really, for all intents and purposes, they're working 40-hour jobs too. They get up every morning and they go to work, and then they come home. And so a lot of me feels that when they're home, I mean, they always have the choice, and this was something that I actually sort of felt proud of myself for letting go of this year, is that my 8-year-old was really struggling with homework. It would be a struggle for hours and hours and hours and hours to do something that we knew he was capable of doing in 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden I realized one day that I work from home, which is nice, but when my work is done, my work is done. And I thought, he shouldn't have to have any more than the 8 hours a day he's already spending trying to learn whatever it is that they're feeding him that day. And so I finally just said to him, you know what? It's your choice. If you do your homework, fine. And if you don't do your homework, that's fine too. And if you get a 0 and the teacher calls me and says you got a 0, I'm going to say, I know, and it's okay with me.
Well, I love that attitude that you have toward school. Have you ever considered, keep in mind what I do for work. For my work is advocating for unschooling and peaceful parenting. So did you ever consider just leaving your job and pulling all the kids home? You wouldn't have to pay the private schools or daycare, and yeah, you wouldn't be making the 40 hours a week income, but you'd just be probably financially, you'd be saving all that money, and you could all be together.
The funny thing is the job that I do, I could still do with all of my kids at home. And I've really been thinking about it. I actually homeschooled our oldest until she was 9. And she actually, the only reason she and her brother ended up going to school is our youngest son is on the spectrum, and he needed a lot of individualized care for his first 2 to 3 years. And my daughter said, I want to go to school. I'm bored here. All he does is scream, and I'm bored here. And I wore him 27 hours a day. He nursed more than any of my other kids, but he just had needs that were outside of the scope, just a lot of sensory stuff, a lot of other stuff. And so she actually started going to school because she asked. She had asked to go to preschool. She went for a year. She said it was boring. She didn't want to go back. So we said, okay, we brought her home. And we kind of did a modified homeschooling, unschooling, till she was 9. And then she was like, I don't want to be home with this screaming baby. I want to go hang out with people my age, and I want to go to school. And we said, okay, we take everything with the kids. We kind of tell them it's on a year-by-year basis, just because I think it would be really hard for them to continually transition if they were to change their mind at all. I don't know, maybe not. They probably know much better than I do.
So they all want to be in school right now? All of your kids want to be there, and your 2-year-old wants to be in daycare?
The 2-year-old likes going because she has friends to play with, and now that the older ones are all in school, I'm the only one left to play with, and sometimes I'm just not any fun. And she'll look at me and she'll say, go to Patty's and play. And I say, okay, well, you can go to Patty's tomorrow morning and play. And that's why we did it just, like I said, a half day, a couple days a week. And we do Mondays and Thursdays so that she's home with me for a couple days and then home with me for a few days instead of, I really can't imagine having her gone any more hours than that. That was sort of my threshold. Not exactly sure what we'll do for school next year. My 8-year-old says he wants to go back because he hated homeschooling when we brought him home. And in all fairness, I wasn't as open-minded to unschooling, I think, when he was at home, only because I didn't know enough to just let him alone for a while, and I think that's really what he needed. I think when he was saying to me, I want to be homeschooled, and my husband and I talked about it, and he said, you know, if that's what he wants to do and you're okay with it, then we can do it. And I think looking back on it now, he wasn't saying I want schooled, he was saying I need a break. And so he came home, and he didn't want to do anything but watch television. All day, every day, he wanted to watch cartoons. And like I said, looking at it now, I look at it and say, oh, what he was saying is where I've been has been too much. I need a break, and I need to decompress. And he needed to find his, I don't know, when I was a kid, I had this great lady who always used to say, find your center. And looking at it now, I can see that he was just trying to find his center again. But he said that, actually, we just had the conversation yesterday, and he said, I never want to be homeschooled again because it was horrible. And I said, well, it was probably horrible because I felt like there were certain things that you should probably be learning instead of listening to what you were telling me you needed. And he said, well, I'd really miss my friends. Well, you can still see your friends if you're homeschooled. And so he has said that he really wants to go back to school next year. Our 5-year-old isn't so sure. He's like, well, I could maybe do homeschooling. So I'm definitely open to either homeschooling or unschooling again. To be honest, I miss my kids. I miss my kids desperately when they're at school, but my daughter, we've talked to her. The nice thing is the school they're in right now only goes through 8th grade, and she will be in 7th grade next year. So if she chooses to go back, that's great, but I kind of told her, I said, the beautiful part is you could unschool high school. She's very into horses. She wants to be an equine veterinarian. She thinks she wants to go into equine surgery. And so I've already told her, if you would like to do something if you want to stay in middle school through the end, that's fine. But if you don't want to do traditional high school, we can get you set up, with some internships and some mentors in those areas. And you can see if that's really what you want to do. So I like the fact that it's an open conversation in our house.
Right. It sounds like you've grown a lot since you tried homeschooling the first time, and you guys have you're starting to evolve as a family. And I think I wouldn't necessarily need to set the ultimatum that they have to choose yearly. I mean, to have total freedom for your kids to be able to have the freedom to come home whenever they're not happy would be, sure. I mean, I would not assume it's going to be hard for them to go back and forth, because when it's their choice and it's internal motivation, it's easy. It's when you're going against, you're following somebody else's wishes and challenges that things are really difficult. So allowing them the freedom to be home when they're unhappy. And, unschooling is a really free, beautiful, joyful life. And it's not at all what you've experienced with traditional homeschooling at all. I can't even imagine trying to control my kids all day and getting them to jump through these hoops and everybody being so miserable working through force. Yep. I like that you're talking to your kids about their friends, because if your child's only going to school for socializing, that would be really a big indicator that you can facilitate more social interaction with them, once they're home, and talking to them about that. So, but once a child's in the system, it is harder for them to understand what life would be like outside of it. That's part of institutionalization, is regardless of whether Sure. it's a private school or not, it's kind of an institutionalized mindset of, oh my gosh, how will I ever fit in? I'll be so different than my group. And, so I think I love the ongoing conversation, but allowing your children the freedom to choose, because life could be so much simpler for you, Carrie, like on so many levels for your whole family. You could let go of your job or some of it if you wanted to, and let the kids all be home, and you could all pursue your passions together. You could facilitate their learning, whatever they're into, beautifully, and live life every day like it's a vacation. You'd have kind of freedom in ways that you've never even dreamed about before, but it's a matter of letting go of fear. And it seems like things are so complicated right now, and they don't have to be. It's all a choice. So whenever the kids have true freedom, and not just saying you can choose yearly by saying you can be home whenever you want to, but this has to be something that you come to on your own, and I respect your personal path, but I'm saying that you can have it if you really want it. So, and if you do decide
I will agree. I don't think, I want to say too that yearly was never like a January to January kind of thing. It was more like if summer months were ending or we needed a decision one way or another, it's like, where do we want to go, and let's make a decision for what we want to do. But that being said, when we brought Jake, our older boy, when he said he wanted to stay home, and we tried that for a while, and everybody was miserable because we were all, I wasn't hearing what he was telling me he needed. So everybody was miserable. And he finally just looked at me and said, I just want to go back to school. And so we didn't wait on that. We made that happen for him, because that's what he was asking for. And like I said, for me, a lot of that decision was I wish I had known then what I know now. We're lucky. We actually just moved in February, and we have a little more room now. The house belongs to us. We were renting before. So I feel like we have the freedom to do a lot more with our kids than we could have before when we were living on somebody else's property with somebody else's rules. So that's given us some more room to just be able to say to the kids, what do you want to do? What feels good to you? Like our 8-year-old, he loves cooking, and he loves anything having to do, like that TV show, How It's Made. He'll watch it all day and all night. And he wants to tinker with things, and he loves learning about alternative energy. And I finally said to him, you know what, bud? If you want, come home, and I will help you, and we will build a windmill. We will build solar panels. I don't care. I don't know how to do it, but I'll learn right along with you. And I think that's what I miss about what it was like when Catherine and I guess we did some homeschooling stuff, but we did a lot of unschooling stuff. It's like, what sparks your interest? We would go to the zoo, and she would pick an animal that was her favorite, and then we would go to the library, and we'd find every book we could find and see if they had a puppet that was that same animal. We would just kind of roll with it, and I think that's what I miss is, I watch my boys coming home with these enormous stacks of Xeroxed papers, and I look at those and I think, that has absolutely nothing to do with how you're going to live the rest of your life. And so
there is
I think
damage. I think it's important to realize too, Carrie, that there is damage to children who are in school, like through that kind of thing. So, through forced learning and all this time doing homework, because even though you have the freedom, and I love that you're respecting them, saying, don't worry about it, I've got your back if you don't do your homework, they're still getting shamed. They're still getting pressure. They're still getting called out on it. And the negative judgment really affects a human being for the rest of their life, not his health, his well-being, his self-confidence. So, I would really get to the base of, like, what are all of the kids' fears and issues? Is it a social thing? Well, the kids get out of school at 3, most kids. Why couldn't their friends come over after school? Or you could set up an unschooling, homeschooling meetup. Really, really, really reassure them that they're not even, what's the first thing you hear when you're in school? You're not here to socialize. They're not allowed to properly hang out and spend time together. In fact, they're usually punished if they do talk during class. So it's not like they're able to hang out with their friends. So, you want home to be, you want home to be a place that your children choose over anywhere else. It's their haven, it's their nest. And when you let go of control and in the fear, because fear is really what causes control. So much of this, Carrie, is an inside job for you. It's working through fears. It's healing past wounds. It's kids come to unschooling, and unschooling is really just a label for living a joyful, free life. Yep. They come to it completely naturally, unless they have been institutionalized for some time. But institutionalization is damage. That's like there's that needs to be healed. So really talking to them about it and just saying, we can have any of your friends over from school anytime, because more than likely they're going to end up sleeping a lot later anyway. So by the time they get up. Yeah. At 10 or 11, their friends will be out of school just a couple hours later, and they could come on over. So really reassuring them of that. I want to help facilitate any parent that wants to move closer to this life. So if you want to set up any kind of discussion with me, if you're really wanting to do this, I'm here for you to help support you. And
thank you.
You're welcome. Do you have any other questions, Carrie?
No, I think I have a lot to think about right now.
Yeah. There's such an amazing network of people, and you're going to connect with so many different people once you step into this life. There's thousands and thousands of families living a free life. What state are you from?
Actually, I'm really lucky because I'm in Michigan. We have an alive and well homeschooling, unschooling community, and the house we moved to is close to a lot of it. And that was part of it, that made it a little bit harder with my daughter, is that the city we were in, we were kind of an outlier. So we were driving a far way to always get to people that were, semi-like-minded. So we're lucky in that way that I know to reconnect with those groups and where to put the feelers out and say, hey, we're coming back. I have a really dear friend who lives, I don't know, probably about 45 minutes or an hour from me now since the move, but she started basically an entire unschooling group, and they do the most amazing things. And honestly, if I were to put my 4 kids in the car and drive an hour to her end of the town, spend the day doing what they do, I would spend that time driving them back and forth to school anyway. So a lot of it is just reframing my mind and saying, oh, well, it might be an hour's drive, but I spend that hour anyway doing all this other quote unquote routine stuff. So I think it gives me a lot to think about too, about where I can start to let go and how we can start to step into something I might ask you about at a later date is I do have some strategic issues because my oldest daughter has a different dad. She's from my previous marriage, and so I have to be careful a little bit with that situation because he has very strong beliefs about how things should go, and I have to be careful that her comfort with herself isn't compromised by him giving her a hard time. There have been, times in the past where I've said, hey, what do you want to do? And she says, I want to do this. And so I'll say to her dad, hey, she really wants to do this. And then he'll go back to her and say, you don't want to do that. Your mother wants you to do that. So I have to be a little bit more cautious with her to help her have some self-preservation and not have her feel that she's putting herself in a more uncomfortable place with her father by making the decision that she would ultimately want to make, if that makes sense.
I think that God provides an opportunity for he and she to learn more about connection and communication. I mean, helping your daughter be strong in her beliefs. And when you're confident, Carrie, in your decision to do this, everybody else will follow suit. And your kids are kind of a mirror of your uncertainty. When you're kind of a little bit nervous and you're not sure and your mind is going back and forth, I mean, I know you just want to be a good mom. We all do. But when you're, I think, really educating yourself about this philosophy to gain more confidence, and when you really confront your children with that confidence and say, I'm ready, we can do this. We don't have to live. I mean, because do you realize that you're not truly free when your children are in school? The institution, again, whether it's private or not, always comes first. You have to ask permission to be with your children and to spend time with them and to take them out. So you could have these levels of freedom. And so by letting go of the fear, and that takes time, you have to really get to that point. When you face that confidence with your children, they're able to be confident in whoever they're interacting with. So although her father might be a little uncomfortable about it, and I don't know the legalities and how uncomfortable, and if he'd threaten some kind of legal action or something, but for her to be able to say, Dad, I'm learning so much, empower her about what that unschooling is learning. This isn't getting away with something. This is true, honest learning. This is legal, and it's healthy, and it's like the most organic, authentic way for human beings to live and learn. So for her to just say, I'm learning so much every day, I'm mentoring with somebody for horses and whatever else she's interested in. You know what I mean? So when you can really get confident about this being a wonderful choice, your kids are going to too. So I think I'll end it there, Carrie, just because we have 5 minutes left, and I really love that you called in, and I know this is a very complicated issue, but I'm here to support you if you want to call back or if you want to set something up with me. So this is exciting. Good luck on this new adventure.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Good luck.
Have a great night. Thank you.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I think so many people could relate to Carrie's situation on many levels. I think once you have children in school, it is a whole different thing to take them out and then start living this life. I've been working with more and more parents recently who are doing just that, even when their children are older, like Carrie's, 11 years old, 12 years old, are just seeing the negative effects of them being institutionalized and all having to jump through the hoops. But kids are scared. They don't know what life's going to be like. There's already so many stereotypes against homeschooling. And so they're not really sure what their social life is going to be like, because what happens when a child is part of school and is part of the institution, they end up bonding a lot with other peers. They bond with their peers. Their peers are extremely influential with what they wear, what they're listening to, what they're doing, and half of their being is connected to these peers and the peers' approval and the peers' disapproval. So obviously that's unhealthy and unnatural to begin with, but it becomes a real dependency issue. And so the thought of who are they? Who are they without these peers telling them who they need to be? It's a really scary thought of who am I when I'm standing alone without all of this influence? And I empathize with kids and teens who are going through that process and saying that you are a whole, perfect person, and through this you will find out who you are. I think that's why sometimes people look at my kids, look at Devin, for example, and say, wow, he's really different. There's something about him that's different. He's never had that peer dependency, so he's been whole from the beginning, and he is his own person. But the thought of standing out is really uncomfortable for a lot of kids. And it's such a hypocritical, crazy thing, isn't it? Everything that you hear on TV, you turn on Disney Channel, all you hear is be yourself, be an individual. But yet, oh my goodness, the second a child falls out of line with what is acceptable in a pure social circle, oh my gosh, they're ridiculed, not only with peers, but with teachers. You're not allowed to be an individual in school. We were watching a school group walk through a farm. Devin and I went to a wild edibles class this week, or last week actually, and there was a school group there, and every child looked the same. They had the same kind of t-shirt, they had the same baseball cap, and these weren't uniforms. This was just everybody wears what everybody else wears. And Devin was the only child in this group, and he really was amazed just looking at these kids and how they all look the same. So my point is, institutionalized children need time to heal. They need to realize that they can be themselves, that they will survive and thrive without this peer group. So we'll talk more about that at a later show. But thanks everybody for tuning in. If you're watching this, listening to this on YouTube, please feel free to comment below. Give it a thumbs up, share it on Facebook. Find me on Facebook. I have 2 pages. Find me on my author page or my personal page. And thanks again for everything, guys. Have a great week.